Hello again everybody. In this video you won't see the body getting to this stage, which is where the actual guitar is now. I've been rather lazy about editing footage and I've got quite a backlog. And I will try and speed things up a bit because I'm conscious that things are moving rather slowly on video at least, and there's been a big gap since the last one. But what I hope will make this one a bit more interesting perhaps is that there are various small problems and issues that crop up on the way, which I had to fix and have more or less managed to, touch wood. So I hope you enjoy it. So as you see, I've marked the line with a piece of tape here, just so I always come back to the same basic point to start bending. I've got a wet cloth here, which I'm going to use in between the iron and the wood to keep it wet and hopefully stop any scorching. And then I've got a piece which I'm going to use to make the bend consistent along a single line. I've no idea if this is going to work, but we'll see. Part of the problem is, and I remember finding this last time, that the shape of the bending iron, or at least the stand for it, means that it kind of gets in the way. So I can't bend along the entire line of the tape all at once, which is irritating to say the least. So I'm going to try and heat the wood up. Oh, that is moving, I think. There's a small bit of movement, but not very much as yet. I don't know if this is still in shot, but I'm basically just letting the wood cool with the bend in more or less the right place over the bench. So now I've got the bend roughly done. I'm just going to leave it weighted down like this, with obviously this piece forcing the edge up, and I'll let time and gravity do, I hope, a lot of the work for me. So I'll come back later and see when it's cooled and dried. This is my outer mould, which as you can see is flexible in terms of the shape of guitar or other instrument I can make in it. Again, another idea I got from Totnes. So basically these upright pieces can be moved in and out and then secured in place with wing nuts underneath. And I've got the Parlour guitar half template in the mould ready. It's lined up along the centre line, so I'll get these set up for the shape of the guitar, and then I'll be ready to bend the sides and clamp them in the mould to let them hold the shape as they cool and dry. The upper bout is bent quite nicely. I've dispensed with the rag because especially on the inside any scorching won't be quite as obvious. I can sand most of it out anyway. The waist is still a bit of a disaster. I still have to try and get that right before I carry on. Because it's harder to do once both the other bouts are. And there's also a crack developing here which I have to be very careful of. This is always a problem with flamed wood. I should perhaps have made the waist section a little bit thinner so it bends more easily. This is all about 2.5 millimeters. It's the following morning now. I left the side clamped up in the mould overnight, and when I first took it out it was actually a pretty close fit to the waist and upper bout. It's already bending back a bit, springing back to its original shape a little bit, but I'm encouraged that if I just bend it, clamp it and leave it till shortly before it all gets glued up with the other side to the blocks and everything, I'm pretty confident everything will work out. It's just wood being wood. The first side is bent now and I've got it clamped up in the mould. I'm just going to leave it there obviously while I do the second side. That little crack on the waist hasn't really developed into anything serious. I'll run some glue in there and then sand it down. It'll be almost invisible and structurally sound, I think. So onto the second side. Wow, that's it. Here are the sides after being clamped overnight. I'm going to take them out of the mould and check them for signs of cupping. So, in other words, sort of bending top to bottom. It's sometimes hard to avoid this, or I find it hard to avoid when you're hand bending on a bending iron. People with moulds, side moulds which have a completely flat inner template to push the sides against, don't have that problem, but I find with hand bending it quite often happens that you get a bit of unevenness top to bottom, which can normally be sanded out, but if it's bad, I'll take the side to the bending iron again and just try and straighten it. So I'll look at these next and see if that's necessary. It doesn't look like it at first glance, but we'll see. Yes, these are actually very good. Yep. So cupping isn't a problem, although that looks as if it could come. The bend on one side is tighter than the other, so while the iron's heating up, I'll try and show what needs to be done. I hope this comes out on the camera, but you can see the curve here is a little off. curve here could be tightened up a bit, and checking both sides. This shows, because this is a nearer match to the curve than this was on this side, that shows that the bend was uneven in the sort of vertical sense. So I need basically to straighten that out. It's also true here, although not as much. And that being a more gradual bend would easily tighten up in the mould when it's time to glue on the linings. The linings stiffen the rim quite a lot, so you pretty much have to get the shape right when you glue the linings in, because from then on it's pretty much fixed. So just probably 10 minutes work on the bending iron will sort out all those small problems. I'm making sure to square from what will be the top side of the guitar, because the back is the side with the taper on it. So now, after a bit of fiddling about with hand plane and the bending iron again, I've got the sides sitting in the mould very easily with just the waste spreader by way of clamping. These are very easily bendable, so when the next job will be to glue in the blocks, so I have to shape those first, but these will conform to the blocks very easily. So I'm happy with everything at this stage. As well as sanding the inside, just to get rid of the slight scorch marks, I also have to glue up this crack. And I have to clamp it very hard, because what's happened is it's actually made a depression on the outside of the waist side. This is, I was going to say inevitably it's the player's side, so the upper would be the upper side when the guitar's being played, but actually it isn't. Normally Sod's law dictates that is going to be the case, but either way it needs fixing. So I'm going to put a rigid clamp on the outside and press this back into the clamp to try and flatten it out again on both sides. And I think I'll do that before sanding, because it'll need to be sanded off anyway afterwards. I'll try and get the light right so you can see there. That's basically the dent on the outside caused by the wood breaking away on the inside. So that's what I have to try and flatten out. So what I think I'll do is I'll mark the area where the dent is, like this, and I'm going to use a bottle to clamp it, which is a tighter curve than the waist curve, although it's close. And then when I clamp from the other side, I can see through the bottle whether the pressure is being applied at the right place. And with luck, I might even be able to see if it's properly flattening out or not. So that's the idea. as always, to a dry run. Okay, I think the pressure is now in the right place, and as far as I can see, I don't know how this will show up on camera, but in there I can see my pencil mark where the crack is on the inside. So I hope that will be enough to not to show on the outside when it's all dry. Okay, it's a few hours later, and I've taken the side out of the clamping arrangement I have, and I have to say this has worked even better than I expected. So after a bit of sanding, I can tell that the marks, the scorch marks, will go, and the dent has in fact completely disappeared from the waste on the outside. On the inside there is still that slight discoloration, but that also is now completely smooth. And that little mark there, I think, might have been in the wood anyway, because there's one right next to it, which was nothing to do with the crack. The crack was along here. And so I think it's just a natural feature of the wood. So I'm very pleased with the way that little fix went. I'm finally getting ready to cut the Soundport on the guitar. I've been putting it off for days, thinking about how best to do it, because although I've done some detailed inlays before, that's generally been on dark wood, where you can basically get away with a murder in terms of the gaps around an inlay. They can be filled and become almost invisible afterwards. But with a cutout, obviously there's no room for error. I've taped the reinforcement piece in position so that I don't have it sliding around after I've got glue on it, and while I try and get the core in place. Here it is clamped up. I've used some vertical reinforcement pieces on the core, just to make sure it's straight and held top to bottom. So we'll leave this for a couple of hours. I've put a patch of plywood on the inside, very thin plywood, just to reinforce the wood enough to be able to hold, I hope, hold the fine points on the wing feathers and things like that. And I'll show you a trial I've done in a minute, but I was wondering how on earth I was going to cut the plant, the olive twig, and in fact I've decided that I'm not going to do a through cut for that. I'm going to inlay it, while the dove itself will be a cutout, so forming the Soundport, in other words. So we'll go over to the bench and I'll show you the trial run I've done. Here's a close-up of the design, and I've tried it on an off-cut of the side, which is a flat piece of wood, so it's easier on this than it's going to be on the side. The things which I was most worried about, rightly so, are the wing feathers here. The tail feathers I haven't really finished because I was trying to get these right. On this wing it's hopeless, but I think if I can get them all looking like that, it's just about acceptable. The inlaying of the twigs seems to have worked quite well. I've just drawn out the leaves and obviously the stem, filled it with ebony dust and CA glue, and then sanded back, and that seems to look good enough, I think. And anyway, I've decided that if all else fails, I can just turn it into an oval Soundport. So I've got a sort of fallback safety net. Here are the tools I've used for the cutout. There's obviously a jeweler's saw, a knife, a little engraving tool like a Dremel, only a little easier to hold in the hand. And I'm just going to pick away at it and try and get things right. Now I've got the main outline of the dove sawn out. I'm going to have to work on the details of the feathers separately. And the beak is going to be a problem because I can't get the saw in there at all. That might have to be knife work. It's harder on the side than it was on the scrap piece, just because there's more wood around which I can't avoid, I can't get rid of. It's part of the side. Anyway, onwards. Here's how I've got it after the saw. You can see I've still got a bit of filing to do, and in particular the head and the beak. The shape isn't even there yet, and generally evening out the curve on all the body shape and the wings. Here's what it looks like after doing the vine, well, the olive branch I should say. I've wet it just to get the paper off. It needs to dry, and then I'm going to sand it. Then I'll put a layer of shellac over everything inside and out, and then the next step will be to fill in the twig with ebony dust and super glue, and the shellac over here will help things sand off cleanly, I hope. Okay, now I've already spotted one bit just below the beak where the ebony's been taken out, so I'm going to have to go over that again afterwards when the rest is dry. So here it is against a dark background, roughly how it'll look on the guitar. I may have to do a little bit more tidying up of the twig, I'm not sure, I'll decide that later. And I might, with apologies to Gabriele Reti, I might end up calling this guitar the Dove. Gabriele's made 2 lovely guitars in the competition. You should check her out. And she's called them, I think it was the Owl and the Eagle. One's an acoustic and one's a kit guitar. So she's entered 2 categories. Very good builder. Now you can see the body glued up with the heel block and tail block in place. The heel block is a little bit high, so the next thing is to plane it down and also leave a very slight inclination upwards to cope with the arch of the top. So I've still got a bit of tidying up to do, but just to have an idea, it's about a little bit more than 1 degree I've left on as an upward slope. And I have to do the same thing on the tail block, obviously. And on the back side, the slope will be slightly greater because there's a bigger arch on the back than the top. By bigger arch, I mean obviously smaller radius, a more tight arch. Even though there's a crossways arch also on the top for most of it, the bit where the fingerboard has to be flat. So I'm flattening this so that the top can be glued down to it and stay flat just in this area. Another job which I think I'm going to do now, because it's going to be easier than after the top or the back are on, is to blacken the edge of the thickness of the sound hole cutout, sorry, the Soundport cutout. And I'm just going to use some blackened shellac to do that. At this stage, the rims are more or less ready for the linings. So I've cut the sides down to the right height at the heel and tail block, sanded the right angles into the blocks here for the curve of the back and the top. The top one will probably need adjusting later because of the neck angle, but there's enough wood in the top to be able to do that. The Soundport cutout is done for the moment anyway. There might be some tidying up to do later. So it's pretty much ready to have the alignments glued in. Well, that was it for now. I'll try and speed things up a bit and get the next video out a bit quicker than this one came. And Moyan! The body, now it's glued up, we need trimming down and the sides sounding smooth and then binding. And then after that it's on to the neck, which is the next major operation. So until then, Goodbye for now.